Hey there, everybody. I'm joined by Steve. Say hello, Steve.
Hey, everybody.
And we are back for another edition of Forgotten CCGs. This video is going to be focused on sort of the community favorites. So, after we did our first two parts of this, and I want to also announce the winners from the polls that we did. But these are games that people put in the comments. These are games that people said, hey, what about this game? What about this game? So, we kind of put together a list of 5 more games that were community favorites. And we're going to do another poll. So, you guys can vote on which one of these games we should do a deeper dive on. And then we're going to have 3 winners, and we decided we're just going to learn all of them. So we're going to do a deeper dive on all 3. So our first winner was the Battlestar Galactica CCG. So we're going to do a bit of a deeper dive there, and then Jedi Knights, do a deeper dive there, and then whatever wins this week. So that's sort of what we got in store. This is a fun series. Please like, comment, all that sort of stuff on this. Love for more people to discover these fun games. And we might do more of these down the road, but I think we're going to try to do deeper dives on the few that people vote on. So I'll leave a link to that, but it's in the communities tab on YouTube, and I'll stop yammering. Steve, what do we got in store today?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me back on, Matt. I think like you said, these are sort of the community favorite forgotten trading card game, collectible card games. And, for these, one thing I want to say before we start is that I don't know these nearly as well as the last few. Probably why I didn't include them in the previous lists. I'm also like sort of less familiar with the IPs of a couple of them as well. So it was interesting for me to do some research and learn about them. And some of them are in various stages of dead/forgotten. Some of them actually are. One of them in particular is being produced in a different form now, so it's kind of interesting. But why don't we just get right into it then with the first
Sure.
one, which is the X-Files collectible card game. Yeah, X-Files is not a show that I've really had a chance to, or taken the opportunity to really dig into and watch. Matt, have you watched much of the X-Files, either
I
the 90s?
watched as a kid as like a treat when I wasn't supposed to be up, right? It was like you stayed up and you're 10 years old, so you got to
Yeah,
watch like Mulder, I don't know, talk to the smoking man.
yeah.
I have a little bit of experience with this. I picked up 2 starters for X Files maybe a year ago for like $10 or something, and I tried playing it, and it just didn't quite click.
Okay.
But it's pretty interesting. You're trying to solve a murder or solve a mystery rather, from what I understand.
Yeah, that's right. So it is basically at the beginning of the game. Well, we'll go through these kind of like we did the last few. I'll talk about these games when they were active, like with the history of them, the premise, collectability. But yeah, basically, you're right. You at the beginning of the game, each player takes a card from their deck of the X file type and puts it face down in front of them. And the goal of the game is to deduce which card your opponent played face down. What is their X file? And the first person to do so wins. And yeah, so I'll get into that in a second. The game was in production from 96 to 98. It had 3 printed sets, a base set, a set called The Truth Is Out There, which I think is mostly a reprint set, but with some additional cards, and a set called 10-13-61, or popularly known as Mulder's Birthday.
Okay, I
Um,
was like, what is that date significance? I
yeah, it's
wasn't quite sure.
Mulder's Birthday. There was another set completed but never printed called 2-23-64, which is Scully's birthday. And I think that it may exist in playtest form somewhere on the internet or in the fan community. Yeah, so it's produced by the U.S. Playing Card Company,
That
which I thought
sounds
was
like a fake company. I just want to say that
it's
sounds like a fake
a
company.
company, but in fact, you probably have some of their product in the form of bicycle playing cards or basically any other like regular suit of playing cards. And I think they acquired the license of this game through buying a smaller company right around the time the game came out or something like that. It's a little convoluted. But in any case, the premise of the game is you are operatives from the Syndicate, which, I don't know a ton about the X-Files. I believe that's the organization that Mulder and Scully are working for. And there's 41 possible X-File cards that you can start the game with. And you are investigating sites with your agents to gain the opportunity to ask questions of your opponent about what their face down card is. And I guess when you do certain things, there's mechanics that give you the opportunity to either ask these questions or to hinder your opponent's ability to ask them. And they can be questions, I guess, like, is your X file related to extraterrestrials or something like that, to narrow down the scope of what the possible X file card could be. There apparently there's very little agent versus agent combat in this game. So your agents won't be directly attacking your opponent's agents. Instead, the combat will be with other kinds of, I think, threats or like monsters they throw at you that can hinder you in various ways. You're trying to protect your secret, you're trying to figure out what your opponent's one is, and so forth. So that's a really, I think, kind of a unique premise for the game. It got me kind of excited to both like learn more about the X-Files universe when you try this game out at some point.
Yeah, I remember just opening up the starter deck and just being a little daunted by the pad of paper in there, right? Because they give you a little pad of paper to keep track of the questions, and it felt a little like Clue or something, which I do think that's a fun mechanic, right? You know, a game doesn't have to just be this sort of symmetrical battle between monsters, right? Like a la Magic, but I think it's fun to have a different twist on it. You're trying to do something else. So I appreciate the creativity, but I think without an explainer and there wasn't a lot of resources, I felt a little overwhelmed by the two starters.
Definitely. This game appears to be in the complexity scale of CCGs. I want to say somewhere in this Decipher Star Wars CCG territory. This game looks like it's got some serious rules and exceptions and so forth. But looking at the art of the cards, particularly the agent cards, I think are really, really kind of nice and thematic looking. It's like you're like opening up a dossier on these characters, some typewriter font, like a gun on the side. The design looks pretty slick to me.
Yeah, I agree. And I know there's some ultra rares I've seen around. There's a few chase ultra rares that maybe from the later sets or something that people are after. Maybe you're going to hit that actually, but
yeah. So yeah. Briefly, I think there are a few ultra rares. My quick skim of the sort of market for this game looks like your rares kind of top out at about $28, $30, maybe a couple of the chase ones or more. Most rares are only a couple of dollars. And booster boxes, sealed ones, appear to be in the $50, $60 range. That's not terrible. I'm sure those playtest sets are a lot more. Community-wise, this game actually seems like it has a pretty active fan base for an out-of-print CCG, and they do a number of big tournaments every year. So I guess there is actually they're planning for a giant 30th anniversary tournament this September, so September 2023, at the Mall of America in Bloomington, Minnesota.
That's fun. All right. Sounds like we got a road trip here.
Yeah, great road trip. Hit up the Lego store over there anyway. Yeah, if you look at, go on YouTube and search this up, there's one of the more active players of this game put up a really, really well-produced promotional video for this tournament in which he's got like faux 90s VCR effects on it. He's pretending to be like an X-Files character, and he teaches the entire game with really high production values. So yeah, if you're interested in more of this game, check that out. And then it looks like webcam games are pretty popular via Discord as well for this game. Oh, and that 30th anniversary tournament, it sounds like they've got one of the like reoccurring character actors for this show, Dean Haglund, who played Richard Langley. He's going to be hosting the tournament. I don't quite know what that means. I don't know, is he the tournament director, or maybe they just
he just got paid like $50 to like show up for like a nominal amount of time or something.
Yeah, but nonetheless, that seems pretty cool. So yeah, there's some fun stuff about this game, I think.
Yeah, that's kind of fun that there's this sort of unique vibrancy there. But let's move on to our next game.
Let's do it. So originally, I was just going to talk about the Call of Cthulhu CCG, since a number of people mentioned that in the comments. But in looking up this game, I realized that this is actually somewhat complicated because there are a number of different collectible card games based on H.P. Lovecraft's and his successors' Cthulhu mythos. So I thought I'd just sort of break that down. It's probably too complicated for me to go through the rules of all these different games. But yeah, so I didn't realize this, but there was the original CCG based on the H.P. Lovecraft Cthulhu universe is called Mythos. And it was produced by Chaosium, which is the company that makes the long-running Call of Cthulhu RPG, which is still being produced today. The Mythos CCG by Chaosium was produced between 96 and 97 and just had a base set and 2 expansions. That's the game you're looking at here on the left of the screen, where Mythos. And then later, Fantasy Flight Games, which they make a lot of different board and miniature games, they produced a different game called The Call of Cthulhu, or I think it's just Call of Cthulhu CCG. And that's what I have here on the right. And that game was released between 2004 and 2008. And then to add another wrinkle to it, as Fantasy Flight began developing their living card game model, their LCG model, they transitioned their CCG into an LCG, which ran from 2008 to 15. So for those of you who don't know, rather than cracking booster packs and boxes, with an LCG, you get like a monthly or bi-monthly drop of like small card sets in which you get the entire
six
set.
cards, right?
Yeah. I think the Call of Cthulhu CCG by Fantasy Flight is compatible with the Cthulhu card game LCG, and they look very similar. Maybe there's some difference in bordering or templating or something like that. But the Mythos game from Chaosium is not compatible. It's a totally different game. So yeah, that was my first bit of confusion. But they're very different games, and they're both inspired by the same works, and they have a couple of similar themes to them.
It's so fun that the Call of Cthulhu fans have had 3 games spanning essentially 2 decades, right, to choose from.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Star Wars CCG people were like, really, there's been no successor. There's a Final Fantasy or Fantasy Flights rather game, but this is pretty cool. I like the art on here. This is Cthulhu. He's less sea monster than I thought he was going to be in that, but maybe he morphs. I don't really know.
I think he's depicted in different ways depending on the the artist, and he always has some kind of like tentacles around his head. Have you read much of the Lovecraft mythos?
I have not. It's been one of those just adjacent universes that it felt too dense to get into.
Yeah, I've read a little bit. He's a difficult writer in many different ways. It's a product of its time. We're going to do a different video about evaluating Lovecraft. But yeah, it's I think more people know about him, his world from various games now and adjacent things, and actually reading it.
I feel like Cthulhu's in a lot of board games, right? There's like I don't know why that IP is so like widespread, whereas other IP is like very protected, but it feels like Cthulhu is just generally in like the gaming
world. Public domain. I think all of his works have passed in the public domain now, which is probably why. But yeah, anyway, just I'm too complicated to break down these games too much. But the Chaosium game, you're playing as investigators trying to complete adventures, and you lose the game. So you win the game if you complete an adventure. First player to complete an adventure. You lose the game if your player's sanity reaches 0. And sanity is kind of a common mechanism in a lot of different Cthulhu products. I think it originally springs from the Call of Cthulhu RPG. And sort of the stories in which you're facing sort of incomprehensibly horrifying beings. You just kind of get through it. The Fantasy Flight games is a bit different in that you have different factions. Some are normally good guys working for like Agency or Miskatonic University, the university from the Lovecraft stories. Some are cultists working for Cthulhu and other beings. And yeah, that's a different kind of, the rule set is quite different. So. All of it's out of print though. The Fantasy Flight LCG finished up in I think 2015, and yeah, the Chaosium game ended in 97. In terms of collectability, the original Mythos game looks like sealed boxes can be had for about $50. The Call of Cthulhu Fantasy Flight game is more expensive. Boxes are about $100. I think the game is a lot more popular than the 90s one. Playing community, what's interesting about this is, as you mentioned, the Lovecraft fan base or the Cthulhu fan base is pretty big, widespread. There's a big Cthulhu like convention every year called Necronomicon.
Sounds awesome.
Named after the book from the Mythos, but it's with convention. I think it's held appropriately enough somewhere in New England every year. And just by browsing their website, they have a lot of Cthulhu gaming, including these games. Seem like they're being played every year at it. So yeah.
Very cool. All right. Let's see what's number 3 here.
Sure. All right.
Ooh, this looks cool. Like I just already am kind of into the Western vibe. You don't really encounter a lot of Western CCG games, I think.
No,
so
this might be the only one, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is Doomtown, originally released as Deadlands Doomtown. And this is another game that springs from an RPG. We could even do like another day, like a full another video just on CCGs inspired by RPGs, because there's a bunch of other ones that sprung up in the 90s. The publication history of this game is really convoluted. A variety of different companies have produced it over the years. But yeah, the original game ran from 98 to 2001. And then, so that was a CCG. It was revived in 2014, if I'm not mistaken, by Aldrich Entertainment Group, which is abbreviated AEG, as a living card game. And it's been going more or less since then. And I think the current iteration, you can still buy it. It's a Kickstarter product now. I think it was funded and released about maybe a year or two ago as the like Weird West edition box set. You get everything. I think there's a few expansions. This game still seems to be pretty actively played with local player bases here or there, a Discord server, online play, and so forth. I think there may even be a website we can play it online. Although I tried to log in, it was down. I don't know if it was the time I was checking or not, but we'll see. The premise of it is it's in a Weird West setting, which is like the Wild West of the 19th century, but alternate history plus fantasy and paranormal elements.
I love that. This looks like it'd be a lot of fun to learn. It's got a little bit, maybe a kind of steampunk. I'm just looking at this guy showboating, kind of this robot with a top hat.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Is he like maybe like a zombie steampunk kind of voodoo? So he's got a kind of a New Orleans top hat going. Yeah, so all that's in there. You've got ghosts, vampires, steampunk. I think there's a thing called ghost rock in the game, which is like a super fuel that's discovered out west in like the 1860s or something, and it leads to these boom towns popping up. And the premise of this game is you are battling for control of a single city, the city of Gomorrah, also known as Doomtown.
Cool.
It's part of the RPG, and the cool thing about this game is I think it has a very comprehensive storyline that's continued from the 90s to today, tying into the RPG. And so the story continues, the new sets reflect the changes in the story. You have different factions, including like a Native American faction. It seems like, at least the recent set pretty respectfully done. You've got various like paranormal factions, cowboys, and so forth. The basic mechanics of this game is that you are vying for control of the single town, and at the end of the sundown phase, you have to have more control of the town, in numerical control, than any other player has influence. And basically, control is earned by having the deeds to various buildings in the town, like the bank, the church, whatever. Influence is gained by you having dudes around town, which is what they call characters. The concept of it is that one player may, institutionally run the town by, banking, whatever. But if you've got another player has more like toughs, in their gang wandering around, maybe the person that owns the land doesn't really have control. So that's kind of the tug of war, I guess.
Interesting. Can you tell me a little bit about why there's why they're suited and they have Jack, Ace, 4?
Yes. And that's a really cool mechanic of this game. Every card is also a poker card. And so at some points in the game, you have two types of hands: a play hand, which is your typical CCG hand, playing characters, whatever. You also have a draw hand that you use to play a variant of poker. And every turn begins with a gambling phase, where you set down your play hand and you pick up your draw hand and you play this poker variant, and using ante of the currency in the game, this ghost rock, and that determines how much resources you're going to have. I think it's one of the ways it determines how many resources you have for the turn, who won that hand of cards at the beginning. And other times,
I'm getting very into the idea of learning. This sounds very fun to collect, and I'm excited.
It does sound really fun. And at other times in the game, I think maybe shootouts are also resolved with some kind of poker mechanic with these suits. So yeah, this game seems really cool. It does seem a bit complicated. Like I'd probably put this somewhere in the Lord of the Rings TCG, Star Wars CCG Richter scale of complexity. But my read through of the rules also indicates it's probably pretty like um, sort of conceptual. Like if you it does what it seems like it would do most of the cards.
So you're just reminding me, maybe one thing that we should create is the Richter scale of complexity. This might be a fun project. The 0 is like young Jedi, the 10 is maybe Middle Earth CCG or
I
something,
think
right?
that's I think that's right. And I think the 0 might be the next game we talk about after this. But
Okay.
no, that's right. I think so. Yeah, if we were to do the Richter, this might be like in the 6-7 range. I would guess. I've not played it yet, but
Yeah, maybe that's something we'll brainstorm on. Final thoughts on this?
final thoughts. This game is not, like I said, not really dead or forgotten, since you can just straight up buy either one of the iterations of the LCG and play it right now, and it looks really fun. So I'm pretty eager to try this at some point, whether it wins the poll or not.
Okay, great. Let's see number 2. And these are not
Cool.
ranked, by the way. These are
No,
just
this one is just kind of arbitrary. Okay, this is The Simpsons, which has another interesting story. One of the commenters recommended it, and they're like, "There's an awesome Simpsons game. I played it in Germany." And so, okay, I thought about that. Must have been in the German language edition of it. But in fact, no, there are two Simpsons collectible card games that have existed. One produced by Wizards of the Coast, the Simpsons TCG, which you see on the left of your screen, produced in 2003, just one set. And the other is a German version called The Simpsons Sammelkartenspiel. I don't speak German, so that sounds like it means
I
card
think
game.
it's just collectible card game.
Yeah,
Someone is a collect card game. It's just a collectible card game. So
oh, do you speak German? I didn't know that.
I do. I'm
Oh,
Bissell.
that's awesome. Okay. Well, then maybe you can do more research on this than I could, because I could not find out a ton about this game since I don't really have any comprehension of German. But what I understand is it's a totally different game, and I believe a slightly more complicated game. So I'll mostly just talk about the Simpsons Wizards of the Coast game, which is one of these games like '01 to '04 or whatever. Wizards was just pumping out card games based upon any IP and giving them like 1 to 2 sets, and then unceremoniously killing them. There must be some interesting corporate history of this. I guess it was around the time that Hasbro bought them, so there's something to do with that.
I heard they were sort of seeing what stuck to the wall, like what stuck. It's sort of like, trying to staple Jello to a tree
Yeah,
approach. And I think that they were just finally decided to clear the way for Magic, right? That was
yeah,
their sort of profit puppy, if you will. And they made a bunch of money. They decided to drop everything else to sort of make room for it.
that's funny. I mean, maybe the Simpsons IP was cheap to license for games, since it's not really a gaming IP. I don't know, but anyway, like there's not much to this game. It's 2 to 5 players. I guess Wizards recommended you play with 3. There's 3 card types: characters, scenes, and actions. And you play characters. They have traits. Like Bart, I think it's partially obscured by our little talking heads here, but he's like a rascal, family kid, and tough. And then there's scene cards, which I didn't list. I probably should have put up here, but scenes have various attributes also, and you either need to match the scenes to complete them, or you don't match the scenes with your character's traits to trash the scene. And I think there's some humor in this game that comes through like the different combinations of this. And then there's actions that like throw wrenches into your opponent's plans, remove their characters, whatever. It seems like most of this game is just kind of like the slightly goofy game text on the cards, like this check the rules action. This card is one of the more popular in the set. They call it a common. And the other cards are like, have a sort of Simpson sensibility to them and their wit, I guess.
Yeah.
There's not a ton to this game. If we were to do our Richter scale of CCGs, this is probably at a 1.
Okay. Just gonna throw it out there to the audience. Let's not learn this.
I just don't think there's much to it. Yeah, it's got, interestingly though, like it's kind of expensive to buy. It looks like booster packs are $6 a piece. I couldn't find boxes being sold. Singles are somewhere in the $3 range, a really low volume for this game. I'm wondering if maybe during the COVID lockdown, people bought up like whatever was left. I'd be curious if, Scott Church or anybody else who's in the know on this knows more. But like, yeah, like Harry Potter, people that just vaguely like The Simpsons bought it up. There's just not much left. I don't know.
Interesting. All right, we're on to our last game here.
Sure. The last one is the City of Heroes CCG, and this is based upon the MMO that was released between, it was played between '04 and 2012. The card game was released by AEG from '06 to '07. And I think I've never played this MMO or this card game, but I think the MMO had a pretty like devoted cult fan base that kept it going much longer than most MMOs ran. And I think there may even be some like private pirate servers still running it, which is funny. So the card game, I guess, was an attempt to capitalize on that enthusiasm, but it didn't last very long. I think what's unique about it is that it you, rather than like versus or other superhero games, you're just playing one hero character, and you play him or her at the beginning of the game, and then throughout the game you are building the hero in the way that I guess you would in the MMO, giving the hero different powers, enhancements, tactics, and you have battles during your turn, but you're constantly shifting what it is your hero can do to try to gain an advantage against your opponent. And you win when you're the last player with a hero standing in the game. It seems like it's a pretty fast-paced, like medium-low complexity game. But yeah, there's not a ton about it online. It seems pretty much totally forgotten. I found a rule book. Yeah, I couldn't find any boxes being sold on eBay anytime in the last year. Some promo cards up for sale at about $8 a piece. You can get lots of this game at around $30. There's a tabletop simulator mod, but yeah, this game seems to have kind of like been a flash in the pan.
Yeah, I mean, I never played Cities of Heroes, so this is totally, random IP to me. Doesn't really mean much. I haven't seen this around much, but it seems, is there a bit of a playing community or a way to play it online?
There is a tabletop simulator mod for it that seems decently well put together. But yeah, a number of people posted about it in the comments, so maybe it seems like it has a draw for some people. But I vaguely recall seeing this in my local game store back when I was in college, but I don't remember anybody playing it really. So I thought I'd throw it out there since a number of people wanted to talk about it. But yeah, interested in the comments if anybody has more experience with this game or more to share. It had a base set and a single expansion called Secret Origins.
Interesting. All right, so I'm going to come back to our sort of full view here and just sort of wrap up. So, folks, please vote in the poll, like, subscribe, all that stuff to the channel. We'd love to just continue growing our out-of-print goofy community. I was telling a friend I'm filming a video on out-of-print games. She's like, "Oh, what?" So, it's great to sort of share this love of these games. And if folks have other suggestions, we might do a part 2 of this. I think we're going to try to do these deep dives, but these are also just a lot of fun discussions. One of the videos I think Steve and I have been noodling over as well is just doing sort of the history of CCGs. That's maybe a more ambitious project, but the 90s and 2000s, early 2000s were really interesting periods for game design, for creativity, where everything was getting a card game. There's probably hundreds of these to kind of pick from, and we just found 15 over the last 3 videos. So this is not comprehensive. Well, we'd love to keep doing this stuff. So people, tell us what you want to hear, and please vote in the poll. Any kind of final thoughts, Steve? What game would you like to learn the most? For me, it's Doomtown.
Doomtown, definitely. That game looks awesome, and it also seems to be pretty accessible to pick up and play right now. So yeah, that one.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in, everybody, and we'll catch you next time.